today we covered chapter 8. So then you'll have everything you need for the project. So there is a folder project. For the project is due November 6th. So it's not due this week. That way you have a little more time to think about it, research. Project itself is due month. Have to be careful. I had to mark it the 4th because those the responses. So main post is November 27th. You have to have your main post. You will not see other posts until you do post yours. To post, you just click right here or data. Other people that have posted here. Talked a lot about it last class. The homework will also, like, part of it will be in your project. For instance, the qualitative data, how you gathered your data and why you chose it. That's also in there. So you are writing it again. But on here, just a couple sentences of what your data is going to be. Remember, the first one, qualitative, is not a number. 25 pieces of data that are not numbers. You can make a survey online and you'll get a ton of responses. You could also do research. You could look up, one I always find because they are always seeing what sharks are spotted and when. And so during Shark Week, you can find usually the total number of each type of shark that was found that week. And there's your 25 pieces of data because the qualitative data would be the type of shark. We went to Handel's last night, favorite ice cream. So it could have to do with your job where you work. One kid worked at one of the steak places and he made salads. And so it was favorite salad. So for the, like a Friday, Saturday, he just kept track of which salads he made that night. Quantitative data needs to be numerical. Has to be a number. You can't find mean, median, mode, range if it's not a number. Depending on what your survey is, amount of hours sleep students get per night, amount of hours you study per week, the amount spent per person at Handel's ice cream. One person did it on the tips per table to see how much you average per table. So something numerical. The last one is what we're going to cover today. It's looking at two things, numerical, and how they go together, and they have to come from the same thing. So maybe handled ice cream, if they did, how many ice cream cones they bought and the amount they paid, that would have a relationship. Sharks, if here you're finding the weight of the shark, here you could also, as you're gathering each of those sharks, find their weight and their length, or their mouth span. So when you find this data, think of something that could go with it, and then you can get both at the same time. But they have to stay paired. So if we were doing shark's weight and length, that weight and length from each shark would be like a point together. It'll be a little easier when we cover this today, but any questions so far? So think about what you're going into or where you work and find something of interest. And don't use sharks because I wore it out. I think there's an assignment on it too. I made videos in case you forgot how to do some of the graphs that you'll need. And the scatter plots here also, which is what we're covering today. So all the project stuff is in one folder marked project, and that's what this tells you. Homework for the project is due November 6th. The project should be a slideshow, either Word or Google Slides. I showed you one last class. It's due November 27th, and you need 5 responses by the following week. The responses are just because I want you to see what other students' projects look like and compare them with yours. It doesn't have to be anything technical. Just look for some that are of interest to you and let them know why you think they're interesting. If the main post is late, I mean, you have a month. If the main post is late, you lose 5 points a day. And then everything is in the file marked project. It's 100 points and it's in a 40% weighted scale. So take it seriously. It'll drop you a whole letter grade if you don't do it. Scatter plot is exactly how it sounds. Bunch of points scattered around. Think of plotting points, X, Y axis, go over X and up. Now notice though, these ones kind of are making a formation and they're going up. And that's why it's a positive relationship. So this is a positive relationship because it's going up. We always look at X increasing and then see what Y is doing. And in this one, Y is increasing. We talked about linear equations. There's a line that we can find that will fall through the middle of our data, and we can use that to estimate future things. It's called a trend line. The closer your points are to the line, the more accurate it will be. There's what's called a correlation. It's R squared. There's also R, but we don't get into that in this course. They just talk about R squared. R squared is between and including 0 and 1. So if your R squared ends up negative or bigger than 1, there's something wrong. The closer it is to 1, the stronger the relationship. Between X and Y. So this R squared would probably be pretty close to 1 because that's a pretty strong relationship. So in this one, as X increases, Y increases because it's going up. It's a strong relationship because the points are close to the line, and the R squared would be close to 1. The second one is forming that line. You can definitely tell that it has a negative relationship because as X increases, as we go across this way, Y decreases. And that makes the negative relationship. Notice X is always increasing. We're looking at it always getting larger. So closer to 1, the stronger. I guess we could put closer to 0 is a weaker. So the closer to 0, the weaker. 0.5 is probably where you'd say anything below that doesn't have a relationship. But anything greater than 0.5, it probably has some type of relationship. You would look into it further. Any questions so far? Notice the last one, the dots are spread all over the place. No relationship. The R squared would be really close to, if not 0. Whoops. So R squared, if it's not 0, it's going to be something really close to 0. And for the trend line, it will be close to horizontal, if not horizontal. This one would be going right down the middle here. Any questions on that? So for the next ones, we want to describe if there's a positive or negative relationship. The age of an automobile and its odometer reading. So as the automobile gets older in age, will the odometer reading increase or decrease? Think about your car and the total number of miles. Positive relationship. Because as this gets older, this gets larger. This keeps increasing. So since the Y value would be increasing, it would be a positive relationship. Any questions on that? Automobile would be the independent variable, and odometer would be dependent because it depends on the age of the vehicle. So when you are doing your project, the one that's causing the other one, for instance, the age of the car causes the number of miles on it to increase. That's your X value. It's the independent variable. The odometer depends on the age of the car. So the odometer is the Y value. The amount of time spent fishing and the amount of bait in the bucket. Positive or negative? Someone said something. Positive. The amount of fish, hopefully, in the bucket is positive, but the amount of bait, the more you fish, you'll keep using it. Yeah, that's okay. So the amount of bait in there, because you keep using it while you're fishing, would go down. So that would be a negative relationship. Any questions on that? The number of passengers in a car and the number of traffic lights on the route. Positive, negative, no relationship. Any questions on that? When finding independent and dependent variables, usually it's pretty easy to see them. Time spent fishing, that lowers the amount of bait. The amount of bait doesn't cause the amount of time you're fishing. But there are some that can go either way. There's a strong relationship between your arm span and your height, but the arm span didn't cause the height and the height didn't cause the arm span. So in that case, you can go either way. So depending on what you choose, you may not have a distinct X and Y. It could be either way. Okay, so this scatter plot shows the numbers of lawns mowed by a local lawn care business during 1 week. As the days go on, the number of lawns that are mowed increases. So it's positive, looks pretty strong relationship. How many days does it take to mow 30 lawns? Now, when you're using an estimate, you're using the line, not points that you have gathered. So for 30 lawns, this is the lawns, we go to 30. We want to go to this red line, not the point, although rounding, it would go to it anyways. 3 3/4 or 4. But when you're finding estimates, you'd be using the line, not the point. But it will still round to 4. Because the line hits a little before it. 3 1/4. About how many lawns can be mowed in one day? So we go to days, we go to the line, not what they did in one of the days. And we go across. Well, I guess it is right at that. Maybe 11 or 12. Is there any questions on reading a graph? We will, for the most part, not find it with the graph. We'll use the trend line. Describe the relationship shown by the data. I kind of said that already, but it's a positive relationship. So I know it's positive because as X is increasing, Y is increasing. From left to right, my graph is going up. I know it's strong because the dots are near the line. For other problems, we'll have R squared, which should be really close to 1. And then I also know as the days worked increases, the amount of lawns so when you're asked to explain the relationship, you want to say if it's positive or negative, strong or weak, and then as whatever X's increases, the Y either increases or decreases. So whenever you're asked to explain, you need to explain all of these. Three to 5 points, usually 3. 1, 2. Any questions on them? Okay, this one, we will not be graphing, but this one says to graphing. There's 2. Show you Excel first. There's 2 ways of doing the scatter plot. If you do have your computer, bring up your Excel. The biggest thing with the Excel, not everyone's will show the trend line in R squared. You might have to go down to the text center. And I will never ask you to find R squared by hand because it is too time consuming and this isn't stats class. Okay, so we have minutes. And you can make things wider by clicking this. Then you just type your data. Just like before you highlight your data. If you highlight the words, it will put it into the graph, but it's not always where you want it. Usually what happens is your Y, like number of students, is going to end up as my title. So it's up to you, but you do want to highlight both pairs of data. Then go to insert, just like we did for the pie graph, the histogram, the bar graph. And this one that looks like dots. I would just choose the first one. You don't need all those lines in it. Looks like a negative relationship. Looks strong. It's close to making a line. Is everyone getting the graph? I typed all my points in, right? Now, a couple different ways to get your trend line. One of them, if you have that little plus sign hooked onto your chart. If you don't, you should have add elements at the top left. You can also, at both of those same spots, get your titles for your axis. Axis titles. And then notice at the bottom it says trend line. When you click on it, it draws a line for your data. But we want the equation, so you want to click on this little arrow and go to more options. So down to trend line and more options. And if you want the axis titles, you just click here. Once you click more options, at the very bottom, it says display equation and display R squared. Now, sometimes it might be on this one. Instead, you want the one with the bars. It's under that one. There's a couple different ones. You can change colors of your points and things like that. But this will display the equation and the R squared. And you can move it so it's easier to see. You can also make the print larger. Notice R squared is 0.9849, really close to 1. It's a very strong relationship. Also gives the trend line, so then if we wanted to find other values, we could plug it in. I think it's the bus, the number of minutes and how many students are left on the bus. Yeah, after school. So if we wanted to find out how many students are left on the bus after 10 minutes, then we could plug 10 in here and find out. Any questions on that? Get around. Now, a lot of these, once we find our trend line, we're gonna have to explain what they are. So our y-intercept is the one without the variable. Now I'm going to round it to a whole number because our y value is the number of students, and a decimal doesn't necessarily make sense. But when you're asked to explain it, y-intercept is when x is 0. So when there's no minutes or when the bus is just starting at time 0, that's our y-intercept when x is 0. There are 54 students on the bus. So that would be explaining the y-intercept. Just like we did the electric bill. Slope is a negative 1.75, which is students over minutes. I'm going to round the slope. I didn't need space there, but so when I'm explaining it, I'm not saying 1 3/4 of a student. The negative means it's decreasing. So x goes up by 1. Each additional minute the number of students on the bus decreases, because it's negative, decreases by 2. Students. So each additional minute, the number of students on the bus decreases by 2. Any questions on explaining it? Is everyone getting the trend line? Any questions on that? I'll show you Desmos. The thing that's nice about Excel is when you're transferring it to for your project, I think it's easier to copy and paste it. I also think attaching them when you have homework assignments is easier. For Desmos, you have to email it to yourself and then do it, because unless you have a Desmos account, you can't just save it on Desmos. So you would go to Desmos. Click on graphing calculator. So the next one access. No, didn't. We'll graph the same one. So for Desmos, this little plus sign, you want to go to table. So you click on the plus sign and go to table. And then you type your X and your Y. Now we can't see it here because we're going all the way up to 45 and this is only going to 15. But any questions on finding the spot to type them? So you hit that little plus sign, go to table and the table. To adjust your units, the wrench that's up here on the right. So click on this wrench. And then you can change. Now these are all positive, so I usually start with -1. That way it shows me the axis. And then see what your largest one is and go a little larger. So if we look at X, it's 32. So maybe I'll make this 35. There's no wrong value. I just go a little larger than what my dad is. Same thing with the Y. There's no negative value, so I've used -1. And then I go up, the largest is 56, so maybe 60. And there's my points. I can tell there's a strong relationship. I can tell that it's a negative relationship. Any questions on that part? You can still find the R squared. Notice at the top of the table, it's X1 and Y1. If you started a new table, it might be X2 and Y2. And so that's what depends on what you're going to type for your equation. Want to click where the number 2 is. Now, since this is Y1, because remember a line is Y equals MX plus B, we're going to use Y1 and X1. But instead of the equal sign, you want this symbol. And it's at the top next to your number 1. You have to hit shift. So first we go Y1, and you don't have to worry about going down. It automatically goes down when you hit the 1. Then you need shift and the keypad, the key next to your 1. You'll get that little squiggly line. And then MX1 plus B. We widen it. But right here it has our R squared 0.9849. It has a slope -1.75. It has B 54.2251. Went a little further in the decimal place. But it's just another way to find it. I know a lot of students struggle with Excel, finding the trend line and the R squared. This is an easy way. Any questions? Make sure you put in your notes, don't forget Y sub 1, X sub 1, and that it's not an equal sign. It's just the most common mistakes. Any questions? Scatter plot shows the number of bushels filled and the numbers of apples picked. How many bushels are needed for 350 apples? Have a line. Could be something like that. 300, if we go up, it looks to be somewhere between 12 and 16, maybe 14. So if we picked 300, oh, I'm at 300, 350. We pick 300, 350 would be this one. Going over, we should have 16 bushels. How many apples can be placed in 8 bushels? You go to the 8 bushels is on this side, and cross to your line and go down. Approximately 2. This is a positive, strong relationship. As the number of apples increases, the number of bushels increase. Any questions on that? A scatter plot shows the cost in bottles containing ounces of juice. This one you have to make sure you convert ounces for the gallon. How much does a gallon of juice cost? A gallon of juice is how many ounces? Does anyone know?
128.
128. So if we want to know how much does a gallon of juice cost, we want to look up 108. 128, sorry. It is 128, right? Is it
120.
I saw the 108 here, that's why I was thinking maybe they wanted, but it would be somewhere out here. So it would be somewhere around 12 or more dollars. How many fluid ounces of juice can you purchase for $3? Dollars is here, go across approximately 26, maybe 30 ounces. Now, lines, I will not have you read the graph. We will find the estimates plugging into the line. Did we get a line on here? Yeah, let's see. Use the equation to predict the cost of 256 fluid ounces. So if we want to find 256 ounces, we plug in for ounces. And that would tell us approximately how much it would cost. So we will not find it in the table. We will actually use our trend line. $22.58. I rounded to the nearest cent because it was money. So when it's money, automatically round to the nearest cent. Any questions on that? We already said it's a positive relationship. And The R squared being close to 1 tells us it's a very strong relationship. Any questions on that? Try number, or not try, do the homework. Try the homework, for next class. Use Excel, use Desmo, see which one you like better. On an exam, the trend line will be given on the in-class portion, on the take-home portion, you'll have to find it.